In an interview with IGN, Bioshock creative director Ken Levine said the goal of Bioshock was to redefine what it means to be a first-person shooter. To put a stake in the heart of all those clichés you've been playing for years: linear corridors, static environments, and cookie-cutter AI. An admittedly ambitious goal for a new IP. But somehow, what we received was so much more than that. Not only was the gameplay innovative for its time, but it took place within an immersive atmosphere and enthralling story. From the moment I jumped into my first bathysphere and plunged deep below the depths into the city of Rapture, I was overwhelmed with a sense of mystery and mystique. Built to be a paradise but turned into a dystopian nightmare, Rapture has secrets hidden around every corner. Fueled by a newfound addictive resource called Atom, the city ran itself into the ground and is now a dangerous place for anyone who dares set foot there. Every answer found throughout your journey in Rapture only seems to lead to more questions, and this results in one of the most thought-provoking and interesting gaming experiences you'll come across. Rapture is an enormous underwater city built by Andrew Ryan, who envisioned a place for society's elite outside of the prying eyes of the government. To ensure protection and isolation, Ryan outlawed any contact with the outside world for any citizen of Rapture once they've arrived. During the construction, a new resource was discovered: a potent, gene-altering substance created by some sort of sea slug on the ocean floor. This new resource was called Atom. Free from the influence of morality, scientists of Rapture processed Atom to create special serums called plasmids. Plasmids inject modified stem cells into the body, allowing for genetic modification and mutation that result in superpower-like abilities. With this discovery, Rapture flourished and wealth disparities grew, presenting a golden opportunity for Frank Fontaine. Frank had a smuggling ring to bring high-demand contraband into Rapture and used his influence over the disenfranchised working class to establish illegal enterprises and obtain enough power to rival Ryan. Alongside doctors Brigid Tenenbaum and Yi Suchung, Fontaine created his own company dedicated to researching plasmids and gene tonics. As Atom became addictive and demand skyrocketed, Fontaine secretly mass-produced Atom through sea slugs implanted in the stomachs of orphan girls, nicknamed Little Sisters. Fontaine was killed in a shootout with police, and Ryan took the opportunity to seize his assets, including control of the Little Sisters. Shortly after, a man named Atlas stood up for the working class and began a violent revolution against Ryan, with both sides using plasmid-enhanced humans known as splicers to wage war on one another. To protect the Little Sisters, Ryan created the Big Daddies, genetically enhanced humans operating big bulky diving suits to escort the Little Sisters as they scavenged Atom from dead bodies. Eventually, Atlas ordered an all-out assault on Ryan and his supporters. The conflict turns Rapture into a war-torn, crumbling dystopia, resulting in societal collapse, countless deaths, many splicers becoming disfigured and insane from Atom abuse, and the few sane survivors barricading themselves away from the chaos. And this is where our story begins. The year is 1960, and we're smoking a cigarette on an airplane that falls out of the sky. Coincidence? Thankfully, the falling plane must have broken the surface tension of the water because Jack, our protagonist, is the sole survivor. We swim through the Atlantic Ocean to find an ominous lighthouse housing a bathysphere. So naturally, we jump in it to see where it leads. After a small introduction by Andrew Ryan, we have the big reveal of the jaw-dropping underwater city, Rapture. This moment is immaculate, and should be considered alongside other legendary reveals such as the Fallout walkout of the Vault moment, or Oblivion when you finally leave the sewer to see the world for the first time. It really sets the tone for what we're about to experience. You can appreciate the sheer size and scale of the city. The dark and desolate presentation gives you an ominous feeling, but the neon lights make me hopeful that this is some sort of futuristic paradise. The wildlife just swim freely around the city, paying it or you no attention at all. Almost as if to say, you're in my habitat. The music continues to build suspense until you finally arrived in Rapture and get a sneak peek at what we'll be fighting down here: splicers. We are also contacted via radio by a man named Atlas, a stranger to us, but seems to be a friendly face that promises to help us get out of here alive. Shortly after, we are introduced to plasmids, have our first run-in with a Little Sister and Big Daddy, and Atlas asks us to save his family from the splicers in Neptune's bounty. We also see a snippet of the dynamics at play down here in Rapture. A splicer threatens a Little Sister, and a Big Daddy comes in to protect her. The Little Sisters extract Adam from dead splicers, which we can use to get plasmids and gene tonics. This leads to the central dilemma in Bioshock. After defeating each Big Daddy, we can choose to save the Little Sister, giving us some Adam, or we can harvest the Little Sister for additional Adam that will help your character get stronger. Throughout the entire game, choosing to harvest instead of rescuing every Little Sister can lead to significantly more Adam and a much more powerful character. Atlas urges us to harvest the Little Sisters to gain maximum power, while Dr. Tenenbaum begs us to rescue them using a plasmid that can remove the sea slug from their bodies and free them of their brainwashing. Whether or not you rescue the Little Sisters also affects which ending you get, so choose wisely. The gameplay of Bioshock gave me strong Dead Space vibes. Very different games at face value, but with a similar approach. I really enjoy the feeling of traversing through the same areas over and over, with more of the map opening up as you progress. There's danger lurking around every corner, with a constant feeling of not being sure if you have enough resources to make it to your next objective. In modern games, I hate the feeling of being shoehorned into side content. I immediately think of the RPG Assassin's Creed games, where you quickly become underleveled and locked out of your main story if you don't go out of your way to farm XP from side objectives. In Bioshock, you can just sprint straight to your next objective, but the constant feeling of being low on resources encourages exploration. I spent my time in Rapture checking every single side room or closet and opening every desk or drawer in hopes to scavenge the resources I needed to survive. In both scenarios, you aren't technically required to veer off the beaten path, but the Bioshock approach is so much more satisfying. There's also tons of choices and variety in gameplay to promote replayability. You collect atoms in the world to unlock new tonics and upgrade plasmids. You collect cash for weapon upgrades and ammo purchases, heals, and EVE. Managing your resources efficiently is essential to your survival, and choosing which tonics and plasmids to spend your EVE on or guns to upgrade and buy ammo for gives you the freedom to experience Rapture however you please. And that's just something we don't see enough of these days. You also have the option to utilize your camera to research enemy types. As you collect more research, you gain knowledge that helps you take down that specific enemy type more easily. It's a mechanic that you can choose to ignore altogether, and there were plenty of times where I found myself failing to use it. But it's just another layer to add to the depth of gameplay. Getting back to the story, we spend most of our time trying to hunt down Andrew Ryan. It's unclear why at the start, but becomes clearer as we march on. Jack fell out of the sky and stumbled upon a secret underwater city, full of dark corridors and collapsing structures. The city is vast, yet traversing Rapture is borderline claustrophobic. Our only goal is to help Atlas and his family escape, but as things unravel and we learn about the atrocities that were committed in Rapture, our ultimate goal becomes putting an end to Andrew Ryan's tyrannical rule. As the overseer of Rapture, he is at least partially responsible for the terrible things that went on here. Exploitation of children, turning orphans into little sisters to collect Adam from corpses for his own gain, mutilation of patients by Dr. Steinman, whose obsession with human anatomy and drive to become the Picasso of surgery led to horrific deaths for many citizens of Rapture, and the gruesome art of musician Sander Cohen, who forces us to murder his former protégés and photograph their corpses to display on his grand stage. But this is why Rapture was created. To live in a society free of social scrutiny, a place where Ryan could live in isolation from the outside world and make his own laws of the land. Our quest eventually leads us to Ryan's office, where we confront Andrew for everything he's done. But this doesn't go as planned, and we get one of the biggest twists in gaming. We learn the truth behind Jack's origin, how he's the illegitimate son of Andrew Ryan, sold by Ryan's mistress to Frank Fontaine. Fontaine then went to doctors Tenenbaum and Suchong to rapidly age Jack into adulthood and turn him into an obedient assassin. Being Andrew Ryan's son, Jack could access any of Rapture's systems locked to Ryan's DNA. And so Jack was smuggled to the surface with false memories of a normal life to wait until Fontaine needed to call Jack back to Rapture to do his dirty work. In Andrew Ryan's office, Ryan takes control of Jack's actions by using the words, "Would you kindly?" a phrase that preceded all of Atlas's requests throughout our journey here. We see a flashback showing that Jack was responsible for the plane crash as well, after reading a note with the trigger phrase. Ryan keeps repeating the phrase, "A man chooses, a slave obeys," which is symbolic of Ryan's reason for creating Rapture. He wanted a place where men and women could choose their own life, without the judgmental eyes of society. and Andrew Ryan made his own final choice by forcing Jack to beat him to death with a golf club, symbolizing himself as a man and Jack as a slave. With Ryan out of the picture, Atlas radios in to reveal that there never was an Atlas. We've been talking to Frank Fontaine this entire time, and he's been using us to do his bidding. This was the most mind-blowing gaming experience I've had up to this point. Typically, instances where you're being manipulated or forced to do something would be conveyed in a cutscene, with your character actively fighting against it, and the big bad guy taunting you as it happens. But it was never like that in Bioshock. All of the manipulation and mind control happened passively. In a sense, you actually had to do what Atlas asked of you since those are the objectives you need to complete to progress the story. But you were freely controlling Jack throughout all of it. It felt like you were in control the whole time. And I think that's an accurate representation of how real manipulation works. The person being controlled never feels like they're being forced to do anything against their will. The brainwashing gives you the misconception that you are in fact choosing your actions. It was such an interesting take on individualism and free will, and really sent me down a rabbit hole of questioning what is even real at this point. So with Ryan dead, Fontaine takes control of Rapture and leaves Jack to be killed by the security drones. But luckily, with the help of Dr. Tenenbaum and the Little Sisters, we survive long enough to remove Fontaine's mental conditioning. Now that we're free from his control, we track him down to his lair for one final battle. Fontaine won't go down without a fight, so he injects himself with copious amounts of Adam, turning him into some sort of incredible Hulk. Thankfully, after a long and grueling battle, the Little Sisters come to our rescue by helping us drain Fontaine of his Adam, resulting in his death. From here, you will get one of two endings depending on if you saved or harvested the Little Sisters you encountered. I chose to rescue every Little Sister for the good ending. Jack takes the Little Sisters back to the surface and adopts them as his daughters. Tenenbaum happily voices over the cutscene, stating that the Little Sisters went on to live full lives with the second chance we gave them. It ends showing the Little Sisters surrounding Jack on his deathbed, signifying a happily ever after. A beautiful ending for such a dark and disturbing life lived by both Jack and the Little Sisters. If you chose to harvest the Little Sisters, you get a slightly different ending. Instead of escaping to the surface with the Little Sisters, Jack turns on them to harvest them for Adam. Tenenbaum narrates over the cutscene, condemning Jack for his actions. But the tone of Tenenbaum's voice gets harsher depending on how many Little Sisters you chose to harvest. A submarine investigating the plane's wreckage becomes surrounded by bathyspheres full of splicers. The splicers attack and steal the submarine, which was carrying nuclear missiles, and Tenenbaum claims that Jack has stolen the terrible secrets of the world. All in all, Bioshock was one of the most creative and innovative games of my lifetime. From heavily impacting the concept of games as art, to redefining what it means to be a first-person shooter, Rapture has changed my outlook on the genre despite waiting almost 18 years to give it a go. Its vibrant exterior shows a city of endless possibilities, fueled by freedom of choice and Ryan's philosophy of individualism. But this concept is completely consumed by its dark and claustrophobic interior, full of exploitation and experiments on children that were never given a choice. The twist behind Jack's journey into Rapture is something that will live rent-free in my head for years to come, and after finishing Bioshock, I couldn't imagine the series could do anything to top this experience. But I couldn't have possibly guessed where this franchise would take me in the future. But first, have you ever gone outside? Because I have.
Well, this fucking sucks.
As a gamer, I don't go outside often, but when I do, it's usually to snowboard. And there's nothing I like more than some rad apparel to complement my interests. Insert Skip the Last, where you can express your love for the mountain year-round with their après ski apparel. They have a little bit of everything, with dope designs and colors to make you the flyest shredder on the mountain. The company is run and owned by my cousin, who's been featured on the channel with the self-proclaimed greatest game battles Ninja Diffuse in COD World War II. And he hooked me up with my first creator code to get you 5% off your order. Just use code REHAB at checkout. I just tried it and it actually worked, which was a nice surprise. And I've paid for all my Skip the Last gear with my own hard-earned cash, so you know I stand by their products. Gotta support the fam. I'd really appreciate it if you gave them a follow on Instagram, checked out their site, and if you find something you like, grab some gear. And don't forget to use code REHAB at checkout for 5% off your order. Now, back to the video. Bioshock 2 has us return to the city of Rapture, but with a twist. While its predecessor temporarily allows you to mimic a Big Daddy, the sequel puts you in the shoes of a Big Daddy for its entirety. It takes place after the events of Bioshock, with the death of Andrew Ryan resulting in a new leader of Rapture. Dr. Sophia Lamb, alongside her brainwashed followers, the Rapture family, have assumed control of the city. Her goal is to restore the city as a utopia centered around her daughter Eleanor. Eleanor is also the little sister to our playable character, Subject Delta. Sophia believes that the bond we have with Eleanor will disrupt her plans, and so the intro begins with Sophia Lamb separating the two and forcing Delta to unalive himself. Delta wakes up 10 years later after being resurrected by a little sister, and we're told to find Eleanor. We also learn from Dr. Tenenbaum that because of our psychological bond with Eleanor, if we don't find her, we're gonna die. So we spend our time trying to track down our little sister while having to deal with members of the Rapture family trying to stop us. In Bioshock 2, your experience in Rapture feels both foreign and familiar. You traverse different areas of the city, which feel much more open and less claustrophobic. This was probably due to the larger size of your playable character, now sporting the Big Daddy suit. You also no longer need to switch between plasmids and weapons, now wielding one in each hand. This was a nice quality of life change. It didn't really make sense that you couldn't use both of your hands at the same time in the original, but I guess it was just a way to balance the experience. Now as a pseudo-superhuman, you can one-hand all your weapons and fire off plasmids with the other. To combat your more powerful playable character, Rapture has more dangerous enemies. The most notable of new enemy types is the Big Sister. These are little sisters that have grown to become unstable and confrontational in Rapture's environment. They are adept with plasmids and are meant to protect the little sisters. This makes them a tough enemy that you'll fight multiple times throughout Rapture, and they synchronize with the new little sister mechanics. Now that you're a Big Daddy, you are paired with a little sister once you capture them. You capture them the same way as the original, by taking out the protective Big Daddy. But now that you're paired, you have the option of extracting Adam from specific corpses found around the map. This sets up a defense minigame of sorts, where you need to defend the little sister from attacking splicers while she extracts the Adam. I found this to be a fun addition at first, giving you time to strategize your defense by setting up traps around your little sister. It helps to immerse you in the life of a Big Daddy, defending your little sister to the death and harvesting Adam in the city of Rapture. But it becomes redundant, since there's a total of 21 little sisters to rescue or harvest throughout Bioshock 2, and each of them can extract Adam from multiple corpses if you want to maximize your resources. And for each level, once you rescue or harvest every available little sister, you're hunted by a Big Sister until you take her down. Overall, I found the sequel to be a new take on a similar formula. You still have the tension and stress of gathering enough resources to survive, which promotes exploration and encourages you to engage in all aspects of the sandbox without outright forcing you to do so. This is something I really appreciate in games, probably more than most people. So it was nice to see that they kept this aspect from the original. You also get new weapons unique to Big Daddies, namely the power drill and rivet gun. It was cool to be able to use the drill that was such an iconic part of the look of the Big Daddy. But in practice, I always found it more efficient to just use ranged weapons. There are tons and tons of weapons to choose from, as well as various ammo types for each. There's a ton of variety, more than enough to keep your mind occupied trying to min-max your engagement with each enemy type. All in all, I feel like the gameplay was changed enough to give us a fresh take on the formula, while still maintaining enough to feel familiar to the beloved original. With the assistance of Dr. Tenenbaum and our ally Augustus Sinclair, we spend our time tracking down Eleanor, who is being held by Sophia Lamb. She plans on using Adam to transfer the minds and memories of all of Rapture's citizens into Eleanor so that she can be their selfless leader. Something Eleanor clearly isn't into since she sent the little sisters to revive Subject Delta so that we could come rescue her. Along our journey, we interact with a few of Sophia Lamb's followers and are given the choice to kill or spare each. Whether or not you choose to kill Grace Holloway, Stanley Poole, and Gil Alexander affects your ending. Some of Sophia's followers deserve death more than others, and your moral compass may affect your decision. Some show remorse after being spared, while others may make you regret your decision. Regardless, you will need to save at least one of Lamb's followers to get the good ending. When we finally make it to the chamber where Eleanor is being held, things don't go as planned. Sophia captures Delta and severs his bond with Eleanor by stopping her heart. As this slowly kills Delta, Eleanor transforms into a big sister to save him. Now that we've been reunited, We head towards an escape pod prepared by our buddy Augustus Sinclair so that we can escape to the surface. Unfortunately, Sophia Lamb converted Sinclair into one final Alpha Series Big Daddy, and with him under Lamb's control, we're forced to kill him in order to escape. As we make our final dash to safety, we're hit by a trap set by Lamb, which mortally wounds Delta. Having spared most of Sophia Lamb's family and rescued all the little sisters, my ending has Eleanor showing mercy to Sophia, saving her life by giving her a breathing apparatus. Delta succumbs to his wounds, and Eleanor absorbs his atom, personality, and memories before leaving Rapture with the little sisters to hopefully better the world at large. Alternatively, if you decided not to show mercy throughout your time in Rapture, Eleanor can leave Sophia to drown, before forcibly taking Delta's atom and expressing interest in conquering the world. I appreciate Bioshock 2's incorporation of moral ambiguity. When choosing to spare or kill members of Sophia Lamb's family, you are presented with information and left to choose if they deserve a second chance. I gave Grace a second chance, but killed Stanley and Gil, and I rescued all 21 little sisters. In a way, the ending seemed to show how I affected Eleanor. Delta was her father figure, and showing mercy to those who seemed to deserve it resulted in Eleanor showing mercy to her mother. At the end of the day, we're all just a product of our environment. Each individual is molded into the person they become due to their life experiences, both good and bad. And it was cool seeing that in a video game form, even if you can just boil it down to spare these people for the good ending or kill these people for the bad ending. Bioshock 2 was able to provide a new perspective on a familiar formula, letting us experience Rapture as an insider instead of someone who stumbled upon the underwater city. And while the story of Delta has ended, we still have one more experience remaining within Rapture. Bioshock 2 was the first in the series to have a single-player DLC. You are once again in the shoes of a Big Daddy, this time taking the reins of Subject Sigma. Gameplay-wise, Minerva's Den is just more Bioshock 2. There are a few additions, such as the Gravity Well Plasmid, which stuns and pulls enemies towards the vortex and allows you to open certain doors. You also get the Ion Lance, a laser weapon wielded by the Big Daddies in Minerva's Den. Minerva's Den is Rapture's central computer core, and Subject Sigma is contacted and guided by Charles Milton Porter to reach his supercomputer named the Thinker, to grab its blueprints so Porter can recreate the Thinker on the surface. Other than fighting the normal set of splicers, our main opposition is CM Porter's former colleague Reed Wall, who has gone insane from splicing and obsessing over the Thinker. After initially working together, it became apparent that they both wanted to use the Thinker for their own selfish needs. Porter attempted to recreate his wife Pearl by emulating her personality with the Thinker, while Wall believed he could program the computer to predict the future. Wall betrayed Porter to Rapture secret police to keep the Thinker for himself. After these events, Minerva's Den was cut off from the rest of Rapture and its scientists attacked Sigma. From here on out, Sigma's only goal is to retrieve the blueprints and escape. But in the meantime, we are exploring Minerva's Den in search of plasmids that can aid in getting us to the computer core. Eventually, we make it to the core where we confront and kill Reed Wall. And when giving our DNA to the Thinker so it can print out the schematics, it is revealed that Subject Sigma is in fact Charles Milton Porter. This was another big twist that I've grown accustomed to in the Bioshock series. But it's still always a fun reveal. Porter was turned into a Big Daddy after being turned over to the Rapture police. The guidance we received from Porter throughout the game actually came from the Thinker, imitating the voice of its creator. This final sequence is a sort of peaceful sunset for our time in Rapture. We walk through Porter's living quarters, no enemies or combat, just alone to take in the surroundings. We see how Porter obsessed over recreating Pearl, before jumping into a bathysphere to the surface with Dr. Tenenbaum. And in some final dialogue, Charles Milton Porter has finally found inner peace regarding the loss of his wife. Minerva's Den was interesting, as it was the first piece of story content with one definitive ending. There are no alternate paths. It set out to tell a singular, concise story and did just that. I didn't quite connect with it as strongly as the base game or the original, but it was an interesting outlet to experience more of what Bioshock 2 had to offer. It was the perfect way to finish up our time in Rapture before moving on to an entirely new setting. But is this the last we see of Rapture? The possibilities are infinite. Bioshock Infinite is the clear outlier when it comes to the trilogy of Bioshock games. Once again being headed by Ken Levine and the original Bioshock team, Infinite aimed to tackle complex themes like American exceptionalism, racism, and religious extremism. This would take us away from Rapture into an entirely new city, Columbia. My jaw dropped the moment I got into a bathysphere and realized I wasn't plunging down into the depths, but instead being launched into the atmosphere. Columbia is a city that seemingly floats in the sky, with such a bright, happy, and peaceful look. Complete opposite of the dark, dreary inner workings of Rapture. Your first steps in the city show an altar and a promise of a savior, with soft church music playing in the background giving off a cult-like feeling. This game is set in the year 1912, roughly 40 years after the events of Bioshock 2. Here we take on another new protagonist, Booker DeWitt, who is sent to Columbia to retrieve Elizabeth, a young woman being held captive there. While the setting is incredibly different from what we've come to expect from Bioshock, I think the biggest change in Infinite was the gameplay. It is so drastically different in a way I can only describe as making it more mainstream. The controls are completely remapped to mirror more popular first-person shooters like Call of Duty. Instead of a seemingly endless weapon wheel, you can now only carry 2 weapons. In addition to looting money off enemies and in the world, you can also loot ammo. You no longer can carry salts or heals to use on your own whim, so you can't stash them for later. You also have a shield, which acts as a sort of regenerating health before your actual health bar takes a hit. I feel like these changes made the experience much easier, or more accessible in the realm of making Bioshock more mainstream. It was a much more run-and-gun approach than the slow and methodical combat you encountered in the claustrophobic tunnels of Rapture. And the biggest change in my opinion is that the vast majority of the game is completely linear. There are sections that are more akin to classic Bioshock, but they were few and far between. I'm not sure the reason for these changes, but it felt like they tried to AAA-ify the franchise. It felt eerily similar to the way that Dead Space 3 was a total change in direction, which is something I was pretty negative on. But surprisingly, I still really enjoyed my time here. It was different, but I wouldn't say it was worse. I'm sure plenty of people would disagree, and change for the sake of change is never a good idea. But as someone who plays a lot of first-person shooters, the gameplay felt more natural to me, and I was able to adapt quickly. That being said, Bioshock was an incredibly unique franchise up to this point, and I do feel it lost that effect in its final iteration. On a positive note, you still have similar plasmids, now called Vigors. They seem less essential here, as the shooting mechanics make the guns feel incredibly powerful. But at least you still have the familiar mechanic to remind you that this is, in fact, the Bioshock universe. Where Bioshock Infinite truly captured me was in its story, which was unexpected since it seemed to be completely disconnected from the story of Rapture. Much like Rapture, Columbia has its own story of creation. The city of Columbia was founded by self-proclaimed prophet Zachary Hale Comstock, and funded by the US government as a floating World's Fair and display of American exceptionalism. It floats above the North American continent, however, after the city intervened in the Boxer Rebellion, tensions rose between Columbia and the American government, resulting in Columbia seceding from the Union. Comstock takes the opportunity to transform the city into a theocratic police state, with Comstock worshipped as a prophet and the founding fathers of the United States venerated as religious icons. Institutional racism and elitism are widespread in the city, with minorities serving as a labor underclass of Columbia, which we see in our first interaction when you're supposed to throw a baseball at an interracial couple. By 1912, Columbia was on the verge of civil war. The founders of Columbia were opposed by the Vox Populi, a resistance group led by Daisy Fitzroy, fighting for the rights of the marginalized. This is where our protagonist, Booker DeWitt, comes in. A detective faced with mounting gambling debts, he is sent to Columbia to find a young woman, Elizabeth, who has the ability to open tears. Tears are a rip in space and time that reveal alternate universes, something we will need to utilize on our journey. Elizabeth has been confined since childhood in the city and guarded by Songbird, a large, robotic bird-like creature who has been both her friend and her warden. 2 individuals, Robert and Rosalind Lutece, direct Booker to Columbia and appear periodically throughout your playthrough. After trying to throw the ball at the announcer, we are recognized as the false shepherd, which makes us an enemy of Columbia. From here, we're forced to use whatever weapons and vigors we come across to fight our way along the skylines to the tower Elizabeth is being kept. Once there, you get a glimpse at the life Elizabeth has lived, treated like a lab rat to be experimented on and observed, with tabs being kept on her location at all times. We see her open a tear that almost goes terribly wrong, and then finally interact with her in the library. Elizabeth is reluctant at first, but after showing her a way out of the tower, she agrees to come with us. Songbird crashes our escape party, but luckily it can't swim, so we get away for now. After waking up on a beach, Elizabeth hears music and runs off to break it down on the dance floor. We grab her attention by promising to take her to Paris by the way of an airship. Our instructions were to tell Elizabeth anything she needed to hear to get her to come with us. But once she finds out our plan is to take her to New York City to pay off our debt, she knocks us out and runs away. After Booker wakes up, we find that the airship is now commandeered by Daisy Fitzroy, who will return the ship to us in exchange for weapons for the Vox Populi. When we catch up with Elizabeth, we explain our plan and she reluctantly agrees to team up again, since we're her only chance at reaching Paris. When showing up to the local gunsmith, we find that he's captured, and when we show up to save him, he's already dead. Elizabeth opens a tear into another reality, one where the gunsmith is still alive. However, things aren't as they seem, and as we open tears to fix each issue we run into, it seems that we break more than we fix. It's a stark reminder that choices have consequences. There's a butterfly effect for everything. This is something that speaks to me on a deeper level. There is no perfect reality, and the more you try to change it, I feel like the further you get from what you really desire. I genuinely think everything happens for a reason, and while bad things will come in life, you're better off accepting them at face value and moving forward than wishing you can change the past. All of your life experiences are meant to lead you right where you're meant to be. Or you can be like Elizabeth and Booker, and end up in a dimension where Booker is a Vox Populi martyr and Columbia is an active war zone. In this reality, we secured the weapons and are ready to trade them for an airship, but Booker is dead in this reality. So Fitzroy says he's either a ghost or an imposter, and either way he only complicates the narrative. Elizabeth is then forced to kill Fitzroy to stop her from executing a child. Elizabeth was visibly shaken up, asking Booker how he forgets, how he washes away the things he's done. But Booker doesn't, he just learns to live with it. As we're about to decide on if we're charting the airship for Paris or New York, Songbird shows back up and destroys the airship, causing it to crash in the city. Robert and Rosalind Lutece hint that music can be used to control Songbird, and at the Comstock house we discover Elizabeth is Comstock's adopted daughter, whom he plans to groom into Columbia's leader after his death. Comstock killed his wife and the Luteces to hide the truth. But once we get into the Comstock house, Elizabeth is once again captured by Songbird. While we're in pursuit, Bioshock Infinite adds to the multiverse confusion, as we are contacted by an elderly Elizabeth who shows us a future of Columbia attacking New York City. She sends us back with instructions for Elizabeth to control Songbird, in hopes Booker can save her younger self and erase the torture and brainwashing she suffered. We save Elizabeth and she vows to kill Comstock. Booker is taken off guard by her change in sentiment. She started this journey as a happy-go-lucky girl, but throughout her interactions with Booker and learning about her place in this world, she's become darker and full of vengeance. Booker says he won't let her kill Comstock because he's gonna do it for her, and that felt like the nicest thing Booker has offered. An attempt to preserve whatever innocence Elizabeth has left. But she firmly has a part to play in this, and tells Booker that they either do this together or she does it alone. No matter what, the damage has been done, and there's no returning Elizabeth to the innocent girl she once was. We fight off waves and waves of enemies as we pursue Comstock on his airship, and on the top deck we find a siphon. Elizabeth explains that they must have been draining her of her powers, as she used to not only be able to open tears, but create new ones as a child. As we finally confront Comstock, he becomes violent, telling Elizabeth to ask Booker what happened to her finger. Booker intervenes by killing Comstock, but now there are more questions than answers. Elizabeth wants to know what Comstock meant about her finger, but Booker denies knowing anything about it. Elizabeth is convinced that Booker just doesn't remember. Using the knowledge given to us from future Elizabeth, we take control of Songbird to fight off Comstock's army and destroy the siphon, which unlocks Elizabeth's full powers. She uses them to open a tear into Rapture, drowning Songbird in the process. I was shocked to see Rapture again, and I was on the edge of my seat wondering how it ties into the city of Columbia. But I was not prepared for the mindfuckery coming my way. We take one last bathysphere ride to a nearby lighthouse, but stepping through that door broke reality. We see on the other side endless lighthouses, all with their own versions of Booker and Elizabeth. Their reality is only one of infinite simultaneous realities depending on their choices. Just constants and variables, as she puts it. But it all leads us to the same place, where it all started. She shows that Robert Lutece approached Booker on behalf of Comstock to acquire Booker's infant daughter, Anna DeWitt, in exchange for erasing his debts. Comstock was unable to have his own children due to his exposure to tears. Elizabeth still has us searching for Comstock, which confuses Booker since he says Comstock is dead. But Elizabeth says he's alive in a million other worlds, and he'll only be dead once he never even lived in the first place. Booker attempted to take Anna back from Comstock, but the closing tear severed Anna's finger. Comstock raised Anna as his own daughter, Elizabeth, and her severed finger, which caused her to exist in two realities simultaneously, is the source of her ability to create tears. Robert Lutece, angry at Comstock's actions, convinced Rosalind to help him bring Booker to the reality where Columbia exists to rescue Elizabeth. Since stopping Comstock requires intervening in his birth, Elizabeth takes Booker back in time to a baptism he attended, in the hope of atoning for his sins he committed at Wounded Knee. She explains that, while Booker changed his mind, the Bookers in alternate universes who accepted the baptism were reborn as Zachary Comstock. Booker DeWitt and Comstock are the same person from different realities, and this twist really had me sitting here contemplating life. And so Booker allows multiple Elizabeths from different realities to drown him at the baptism, preventing Comstock's existence. One by one, the Elizabeths begin to disappear, the screen cutting to black on the last. In a short post-credit scene, Booker wakes up in his apartment on October 8, 1893, the day he gave Anna away. He calls out for Anna and opens the door to her room before the screen cuts to black. When it comes to life, people come and go. Some you remember and some you forget. But I truly believe that people never forget how you make them feel. I view video games in a similar vein. Bioshock Infinite had me on the edge of my seat as its story unfolded. It was a roller coaster of a ride, a mystery to be discovered. And I'll never forget the way it made me feel as it was revealed to me that the protagonist and the antagonist of the story were in fact the same person. People are malleable. Some are good, some are bad. But every bad person could have been a good person, and every good person a bad one. At the end of the day, we're all just a product of our environment. Each person is a sum of each individual interaction and life experience, culminated into one living being. But is it fate, or a result of the choices we make? I'm not sure I can answer that question. Overall, Bioshock Infinite was a weird one. On one hand, it was the antithesis of the first two games. Two games that I grew to love while experiencing them for the first time. But I genuinely don't view Infinite as better or worse than Bioshock or Bioshock 2. It was just different. Something that I can appreciate on its own merits, regardless of it having the burden of carrying the Bioshock name. And while I feel like it was the perfect ending for Bioshock, there is still a little more story to tell. Bioshock Infinite continued the trend set by Bioshock 2 and included 2 episodic story DLCs. In Burial at Sea Episode 1, you are again in control of Booker DeWitt, but this time with a twist. It takes place after the events of Bioshock Infinite, but before the events of the original Bioshock. It is before the fall of Rapture, and Elizabeth shows up to employ Booker's services as a private detective to find a missing girl, a girl that Booker states is already dead. From here, the story centers around finding Sally. Episode 1 is incredibly short, and saw a mix of elements from Infinite Sandbox and the prior 2 games. Vigors are reclassified as plasmids, you can hold more than 2 weapons again, and there's much less ammo to find around. The gameplay focuses much less on combat and more on finding the Old Man Winter plasmid to freeze yourself a bridge to cross, once our old friend Sander Cohen tells us that Sally is in the Fontaine department store. The store was sunk and cut off from the rest of the city by Rapture's founder Andrew Ryan to serve as a prison for the followers of his believed dead competitor, Frank Fontaine. After fighting through Fontaine's henchmen, we get the plasmid to cross the burst pipe and take one last bathysphere ride to find Sally. She hides in the vents, and we're unable to get to her. After taking a look at the schematics, we close the 5 other connected vents and turn up the heat to flush her out. Unfortunately, Sally is a little sister, so a Big Daddy comes in to save her. We slay our last Big D and go save Sally. When trying to pull her out of the vent, Booker gets flashbacks to events he had previously forgotten. Similar to the base game, Booker gives his child away, but changes his mind at the last second. Except here, it wasn't her finger that was severed, it was her head, which is why he had the doll head of Sally all this time. Booker realizes he once went by the name Zachary Hale Comstock. Childless, Comstock enlisted the help of the scientists Robert and Rosalind Lutece to steal the infant Anna, who would grow up to be Elizabeth, from a version of Booker DeWitt in an alternate universe. But Anna was accidentally killed. Comstock was shamed by his actions and had the Lutece twins send him to Rapture, where he lost his memories and changed his identity to Booker DeWitt. Realizing what he has done, he tries to apologize to Elizabeth, but she refuses and Comstock is killed by an armored Big Daddy. It was so interesting that in episode 1 we were interacting with Booker and Elizabeth in another dimension. Similar lives and events that just happened to play out differently. It kind of makes me think about how differently life could have turned out, and maybe did, somewhere else. I guess we'll never know. At the end of the day, it's an interesting thought experiment, and I like when games make me think about things I otherwise wouldn't have. But other than the story, there wasn't much to episode 1. I beat it in a little over an hour, and it was a fun little play session. Mechanically, it was just more Bioshock Infinite, which isn't a bad thing, but it doesn't really feel like something you need to play. Very different from the final part of our journey, which seemed to take the Bioshock Infinite experience and turn it on its head. Burial at Sea Episode 2 is the final piece of the puzzle. As a change of pace, you play as Elizabeth, with a much bigger focus on stealth gameplay than anything we've seen before. You need to be cognizant of the path you take, as splashing pools of water or stepping on glass wool are enemies. Alternatively, carpets muffle the sound of your footsteps, so pay attention. They try to help you out in this aspect with a new plasmid, the Peeping Tom, which allows you to see through walls. We also get a crossbow that can fire noisemakers, knockout gas, or tranquilizer darts. The focus is much more on survival than killing your enemies, which is a drastic change from the base game. Using a DLC to try something new and give players a different experience is something that I welcome, but I didn't really enjoy the gameplay that much. And with it being almost double the length of episode 1, I found myself beelining it to the end and just wanting it to be over. Story-wise, we start in Elizabeth's dream, frolicking around the streets of Paris before turning into a nightmare of Sally burning in the vent from episode 1. Elizabeth wakes up to find herself and Sally captured by Atlas, who we all know as Frank Fontaine. A vision of Booker instructs Elizabeth to say that she knows how to get Atlas and his followers back to Rapture, so Atlas agrees to hand over Sally in exchange. Elizabeth finds her own dead body and realizes she has been killed by a Big Daddy. In returning to a universe where she died, all other alternate versions of herself have collapsed, and so she lost her previous ability to see through the multiverse. We sneak our way into Suchong's lab, where we find a portal to Columbia. After talking with the Booker in her head, she realizes that by using some of the particles that keep Columbia afloat, she can lift Fontaine's building. We find schematics that give us a list of everything we need to fix the machine, and sneak our way around gathering the supplies. We grab the quantum particle in Columbia, but Suchong won't let us back unless we grab a hair particle for him. Okay, freak. On the way to grab it, we learn that Suchong and Columbia industrialist Jeremiah Fink had shared technology, co-developing the Big Daddies and Songbird. I really like how they made an effort to tie in all of Bioshock lore here. It makes the games all feel much more connected. When starting Infinite, it was a little discouraging that you were in a completely new city, far away from the events of the first two games. But something about them all being related makes me appreciate the series so much more. Anyway, we make it back to the Fontaine building and raise the department store, but Atlas goes back on his deal. He drugs us and demands for us to tell him where the ace in the hole is, despite Elizabeth not knowing what he's talking about. Elizabeth wakes up 2 weeks later to see Atlas torturing Sally in order to convince us to retrieve the ace from Suchong's lab. Elizabeth finds Suchong as he's killed by a Big Daddy for harming a little sister. With him is a coded message that Elizabeth realizes is the ace in the hole. The phrase, "Would you kindly?" A trigger phrase that Suchong implanted in Jack from the original Bioshock, the son of Ryan that Atlas sent to the surface. Atlas orders his men to make arrangements for Jack to come to Rapture, and then beats Elizabeth to death with a wrench. In her final moments, Elizabeth has a vision of the events that will come to pass. Jack comes to Rapture, kills Ryan and Atlas, and saves Sally and the other little sisters. We get one final post-credit scene showing a shot of Rapture as a crash plane sinks into the city, signaling Jack's arrival and the events of Bioshock. This ending completely changed my opinion on episode 2. I wasn't jiving with the complete 180 in terms of gameplay, and it felt like getting through the series was dragging on at this point. But the way that the developers wrapped the entirety of the series up in a pretty little bow was nothing short of poetic. Having Elizabeth's journey in Rapture tying back to the very catalyst that began the series was mind-blowing. From Atlas being Frank Fontaine in the original, to Booker DeWitt being an alternate version of Comstock, and now our journey with Elizabeth wrapping back around to the start of the series, I just love how interconnected everything became. The twist in these stories is by far the most defining feature of Bioshock in my opinion, and is what really transcended the series as a whole for me. Before I started working on this video, Bioshock was just a series people loved that I knew nothing about. But after finally playing through it in its entirety, I could not be more excited for what comes next. And that takes us to the current day. Bioshock 4 was confirmed to be in development back in December 2019. And nearly 6 years later, we still haven't heard much about it. Whether that's due to them working in silence or having a tough development cycle is unknown, but it seems like it's time we learn some details. It's being developed by Cloud Chamber, which is a new studio to the series made up of veteran Bioshock developers. The creator of Bioshock, Ken LaVine, is not associated with the project and is off doing his own thing, which is a little discouraging. But he wasn't a part of Bioshock 2 either, which some people in my Twitch chat touted as their favorite in the series. So I'm just going to sit back and wait to judge Bioshock 4 until we finally see that long-awaited reveal. All I know is that if the series is anything to go by, the possibilities are truly infinite. But those are just my thoughts on the Bioshock franchise. If you want to see a similar video where I played the entire Dead Space series for the first time, click the video on your screen now.